Hello, 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 and welcome to What Sharon Said. If you're tuning in, please confirm that you can hear me on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So, What Sharon Said is all about life, learning, and anti racism. I'm Sharon Hurley Hall, founder of Sharon's Anti Racism newsletter and the Share Anti Racism community, author of I'm Tired of Racism, educator, activist. I am interested in pretty much everything, hence the three subtopics for the show: life, learning, and anti racism. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about legacy. We've had a couple of milestone birthdays in our family this year, one of them my own. But I'm dedicating this episode to my mum, who turned 85 years young this past week. Having celebrated a milestone birthday myself recently, and following my sister Lisa's post about book legacy, which I'll get back to, I've been thinking a lot about my purpose and the actions that result from that. We had a very fun celebration for my mum with balloons, cake, a lovely meal. And yeah, I want to talk about legacy in terms of the legacy that I have got from her and also the legacy that I try to pass on to those in my family. So, yeah, if you're listening in and you're hearing me, please let me know. I can confirm that I am live at least. So, that is something. Um, and for those on Team Replay, I would love to hear your thoughts on what I'm talking about today. So, my mother Kathleen, has been an inspiration to me in a lot of ways throughout my life. She lived in a bunch of places as a child throughout the Caribbean and traveled a fair bit as an adult, which is one reason why all the members of our family were born in different places. I mean, you've heard Lisa and me talk about this before. You know, she's Jamaican born. I was born in England. My mother's Trinidadian. My father's Barbadian. I was actually shocked to learn about my mother when I was, well grown, because I guess this is not this kind of story you tell to your little kids. I was shocked to learn that she had hitchhiked across Europe, the kind of thing that she would be horrified if we did. But, on reflection, given her spirit of adventure and her willingness to try new things, which persists to this day, that is really not a surprise. My mother was an expert seamstress, having started making her own clothes, I think, in her early teens. And I actually never wore any ready made clothes apart from jeans until I was in my 20s, which has really spoiled me because nothing else has ever fitted as well as the clothes that she made for me and for us when we were children. And she was a craftswoman. She made handbags, leather shoes, dashikis with intricate embroidery, macrame hangings. And, just to add, I know a lot of people talk about me pivoting from this to the other, but I also had a great example in my mother who worked, well, her longest standing job, I believe, was for the European Union working here in Barbados. And she held several communications and administrative roles throughout that time. And when she retired, uh, when she was not much older than I am now, she then launched a silk flower decoration business, which is totally in keeping because, she's always been good with her hands, interested in design, you know. And so she did, for when I got married, I had silk flower, a silk flower bouquet. So, which means that I still have it nearly 25 years later. You know, there are silk flower arrangements around our home. She kept that going for maybe a good 15 years, right? Let's see. I see some messages in the chat. Hi, Lisa. I am talking about our your mama bear, our mother today, and I'm dedicating this episode to her. And so I think that she might well have been in her 70s when the choir she belonged to recorded a CD and toured Canada with it. I always joked that, my mother had a more interesting life than I did. There she was touring and doing new things when I was stuck with my nose to the grindstone doing freelance writing. She's also a Reiki master, my Reiki master, and we teach classes together. And so that is another form of legacy that she has been passing down. It's really, really quite impressive. Yeah, she's just, she is just amazing. So, when we talk about legacy, there's that example. There's her example as a parent. There's her example as a human being. Her example as someone who gives people the benefit of the doubt. The calm demeanor which I have finally achieved in the last couple of years. Um, she is just always has been and will be one of the biggest influences on my life. She was and is an avid reader, and I was surrounded by books as a child, and that's something that I passed on to my own child, who now has a reading habit that almost matches mine. So, there are all kinds of legacy for us to think about in that, right? She's a huge inspiration, Lisa. Huge, huge inspiration. Definitely agree. Um, which then brings me to learning. I'm a second generation university graduate, which is not unheard of among my peers, but also not that common. My parents, one of the things that is funny, I was talking to a friend about this today, about the way, our culture prizes education. It's like there was never any question that we were going to go to university, go to college, that we were going to study. And something else I think I passed down to my own daughter. Um, you know, my parents prized education and they excelled in the subjects that they chose. Um, Interestingly enough, my interest in and affinity for languages is something I also get from my parents. Um, they both did language degrees. My father, as you've known if you've read Lisa's post, was a professor of Africana literature at Stony Brook University. I used my languages in my profession, and my daughter is now studying linguistics. So, legacy, legacy, legacy. And, that leads to some interesting experiences. The day I started college, one of my father's former peers asked if I was also going to get a first class honors degree. It, it kind of sets the stage for the expectations that are put upon you, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, if I'm honest. It can feel a little bit pressured. I actually did not I got a very humble degree, although I did make up for it later with my master's. Legacy is also about using my parents' old school books as my personal library as I was studying French and Spanish. I followed them to France as a teaching assistant, as did my sister Lisa. I ended up in the same town where my mother had done her teaching assistant stint. Lisa, Lisa did all the same, right? Ending up in Nice. There was so much. So Lisa's post actually made me think about all the different ways in which legacy has played out in our family and continues to do so. And her post was about book publishing and the fact that my dad has published 3 books. I've published a couple, and Lisa's book is coming out very, very soon, in less than a month, I think. No, not less than a month, less than 2 months. So that is legacy. That is legacy. And can I say I'm so proud of my sister Lisa? Her book, her book is coming out. It is an excellent book. And her graphic of all the books in a sort of book family tree is what got me started on this. And she points out, yes, I have 2 master's degrees. It is true. It is true. Um, so yes, it was definitely it's definitely something to think about, the way in which members of your family can influence you either positively or negatively. But in this case, in terms of what we're talking about, there's definitely been a positive influence. in terms of knowing what is possible for you, and and then seeing it play out in your own life. And then you think, okay, what else do I want to do to carry on that legacy? And for me, one of the things I've talked about before is, because I know so many kids, so many Black kids graduate and they have debts and so on. The next level for me was, is it possible to create a world in which my daughter can get her education and come out of it without debt? Um, and yeah, it was a long haul at times. It was a long haul, and it definitely took a village. My sister provided a home away from home for the first couple of years of her degree. You know, it was just, there was a lot of involvement, and there's been a lot of support from all sides of our family in order to make this happen. But it did happen. It did happen, and she got through her bachelor's and her master's, and her PhD is funded. And I feel like, okay, we did it. So again, it is about breaking some of those breaking some of those chains, making new things happen. Um, and sometimes it just takes the will, right? And also, I think it's really important to celebrate the the will and the drive and the ability to do these things. And yes, it does mean that we have a certain amount of privilege. We've had examples in our family that have gone before us, that have said to us, yeah, these things are possible. This is something that you can do. And so then we have decided to pick ourselves up and do it, you know. Yes. Okay. So that is legacy. And if you're watching or watching on Team Replay, I would love to hear what role legacy has played um, in your own path, in your own growth. You know, it is just amazing. Another small piece of legacy. I'm wearing um, my sister's merch here. Black women deserve to breathe, from the Great Exhale, and it is a great thing to have skills within your own family, because when I was ready to set up my merch store, Lisa created the first bit for me, right? The support for each other is crucial. The practical skills that we bring, our willingness to share what we have learned, all of that, I think, is part of our legacy. And so as we start to wind down, I'm going to be keeping this episode short today. Let me talk a little bit about anti-racism. Just check the chat first of all, right? And I someone asked me the other day whether you know the struggle was like getting me down in terms of anti-racism. And I thought about it, because sometimes you can be really close to a thing, and sometimes terrible things happen and you feel down about them. But then I thought, I always also try to focus on joy, to focus on uplifting people. This is not to say I don't have bad days and sad days. I think everybody involved in this work does. And sometimes it seems particularly hard, but I think it's also important to find the joy, to take the rest, because all of that is also resistance. You know, exactly. And so it's something that I'm thinking about and paying attention to, because I don't think we do anybody any good if we get so downcast that we can't do what we're called to do. Um, so it's a reminder to myself and to all of us to think about joy, to focus about joy, to focus about to focus on what's going right and not just what's going wrong. So yes, and finally, I am still reading An African History of Africa by Zainab Badawi. And yesterday, although I don't often listen to audiobooks, I did listen to a bit of it on audio yesterday, because I had some stuff to do around the house, and I thought, okay, let me listen to it. And her voice is just as lovely as ever. And I have really been enjoying this this exploration of history from different perspectives. And she doesn't shy away from the hard things. She doesn't shy away from the slightly uncomfortable things, but she also gives another perspective to historical events that we have only heard about from one perspective, from the perspective of the people that colonized Africa. And so it is good to from, hear a different perspective. And also because I tend to have a nonfiction book on the go while I read other fiction books, I'm reading a sci-fi series translated from German by using an AI tool called Deepo. And it has led to some interesting phraseology, which interests me as a language person, because that tool doesn't always know how to turn German cases into readable English. And so, something could be a he, she, or it at any particular time. No problem there. I don't usually have a problem working out what is being said and what is meant, but it does sometimes jar in the reading process. I have, however, determined, not that I was actually considering it, that is not a route that I will go if I need to translate my own work. I actually know some translators, so I will aim to get the funds to hire them. Okay, so that is pretty much it. I'm going to drop in the comments on YouTube and LinkedIn the link to Lisa's post that inspired this issue, this edition. And the next episode will be towards the end of May, as I have a few personal things to take care of in May. It may even be early June. So thanks for being here. Team Replay, thanks for tuning in afterwards. And I will see you next time. Bye.